tired, energy. I mean, Randall gave me a ton of energy, and I also have the nerves getting up here in front of you all. So I actually stole this from Tanya's notes. Before the conference started, we all got up here and kind of checked out the space, and Tanya's notes were up here, and it had breathe and feel the ground. But there's actually a really important point there that I didn't have in my slides that I want us all to do right now. It's optional for you, but like before you open your mouth and start speaking, the most important skill we can all have is to stop, take a breath, big one. You are now 100% less likely to say something incredibly stupid. So as Tanya said, I've been doing this for about 25 years. Most of it's been around SRE kind of things. I was a senior principal engineer at Equinix. Most of this is about my time there doing work in a large enterprise that's 20 plus years old, and change is hard. And this is a proverb from Japan. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And when I look out here, I see all of the tallest nails in your organizations. That is the job. Right? As Jonathan charged us with a job to go and change our organizations. So being the SRE, I have to bring you the bad news. It isn't always easy, and things will happen, and that hammer is coming for you. And so I've learned a lot over the years, and most of my inspiration actually comes from this book, which is by the founder of Aikido. I'm not an Aikido practitioner. I'm not going to try to appropriate too much in here, but the thing that I love about Aikido is it's a nonviolent way to victory in the face of conflict. And mostly what you hear about this, and like the part that I take away from it, is people are going to come at you with energy. Sometimes they mean violence, sometimes they have their own feelings, but it's going to come your way because you are the focal point. And so what do? Right? One of the things in Aikido is you don't absorb that energy, you move it past you. Right? You use their energy to protect yourself and often your opponent, which is the part I especially love. So in the description for this book, it said, the real way of the warrior is based on compassion, wisdom, fearlessness, and love of nature, which reminded me of Kelly. So the first thing there's plenty of things. These are just going to be little points I want you to try to remember over time. And one of them is it's usually not about you. People will come at you with a lot of energy, anger, frustration, sometimes other more positive emotions, but a lot of times it's not necessarily about you. That idiom from Japan is a cultural thing, right? Like the tallest nail gets hammered down is usually built into your culture, and there's not a lot you can do about it. But when you recognize that, you can start to cope and control yourself, at least a little bit, right? So we talked a lot about it depends, but like I think one of the real superpowers we all have is to be the village fool, right? When somebody's talking about, like when generic good stuff comes up, you don't just say, well, that's not right. What you do is you ask a question. What are we trying to do here? Are you sure you really understand the problem? Or maybe that's not the right question, right? Because now you're questioning their judgment and their intelligence, and you're going to get a reaction. And so you want to play the 5-year-old and ask why about everything. Why? Oh, I don't understand that. Could you please explain it some more? And usually by the time you get people through answering these questions, the best way to do this is to get the little light bulb to come on over their head without them even realizing you got them there. But you can't drag them there. You can't make people learn things. Control is an illusion. I said maybe we can control ourselves. We can sort of control our reactions, but can we? Right? We can take deep breaths. We can meditate, we can exercise, but like still sometimes those feelings are going to take control of us. There's a book, it's called Deliberate Calm, that talks a little bit about how to cope with this, but we have to realize that a lot of times we're just not going to be in control most of the time, or maybe never. Before we started this session, right, Randall and I were standing up here, we were kind of dancing, right? And this is my opportunity to mention Donella Meadows, who has written extensively about systems thinking. And my favorite phrase from all of it, and there's an essay called Dancing with Systems. If you Google that, you will find it. And what it means is like, it's again going back that you can't really control it. Large systems, everybody here is working in a hyper-complex system. You can't just go and say like, well, I'm going to go and change the culture. You have to dance with it. You have to get the beat. You have to find the groove. And then you have to start moving with the organization, with the technical systems as they change. And if you're kind of taking this attitude, and again, this is about you, your internal state, is I'm dancing with it. I'm not really like trying to be in charge. I'm just kind of moving as the org changes. There's a reorg today. Great. I got a new beat. Tomorrow, there's a new framework. All right, I got that too. You're dancing with the system. We also have to meet people where they are, right? Generic good stuff. It's a junior engineer. They don't know anything yet. Remember when you were in your first year? We didn't know crap. And so we have to meet people where they are. If they're a junior engineer, we meet them at that level. We ask those foolish questions that maybe feel a little bit simple to us, but like they're meant to help that person learn. And so we're meeting them where they are. And the other thing that I find really, really incredibly useful, especially in enterprises that maybe aren't a Netflix or somewhere that's like very technology focused, is most of the people working there, especially in America, I don't know about the rest of the world, there are some places where maybe this isn't the case, but most people are in a work or die situation, right? Most of us are putting bread on our table. Most of the folks we work with, those of us here are at a very high privilege level to be able to not have to worry every day whether we have bread to eat. And sometimes when you experience behavior from people, when you're trying to change something about their job, it's not necessarily about the change. You're just kind of rattling their amygdala a little bit. And so they're starting to get scared, and maybe they don't even realize it, right? Because we're talking about basic needs here. So we have to meet people there and understand that the fear is going to activate, and it's not about you. As things change, people's behavior will change. I actually heard this very recently from somebody new who joined Netflix, and I was talking to her about this talk, and she used to work at Twitter. I won't use that name it has now. And worked close to the boss. And she found that there was kind of 4 categories of people. Some people would be reckless, and they only really looked out for themselves. Some people would do the Homer into the bush, whoop, right? I knocked over late. Some people probably ask people, oh yeah, sure boss, I got it. They wouldn't even really argue, right? And then there's kind of probably what I see out here, right? The folks who will do everything to help me and the people around me and work as a team. But we have to consider the fact that people change over time. Their lives change independently of their work lives, right? And so maybe something's happening in their life that causes their behavior to change, and then you have to re-know them. So I really love this. I got it for free from a friend. And all through all of this, right, I didn't give you heard all these things that you can do to change your organization, but the reality is we can lay the breadcrumbs, we can draw the path, we can build a map, but we're never going to arrive where our imagination originally started. The talk just before me, right, they were talking about how they went through 3 iterations to get there. And that's because all of these things in these hyper-complex systems are emergent, especially the high-impact work, right? When you want to change the culture, that's, I think, the highest impact work we can do. It isn't like I'm going to go and write a document and then everybody's going to behave differently. Who's tried that? You write a culture doc, and they're like, yeah, everybody's going to adopt the new culture, and it's going to be awesome. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, right? You have to work over time, and the culture emerges, right? It emerges from your behavior as a leader. It emerges from the culture documents that you write and share. It emerges from each conversation where people align on what they care about and what they're going to do next. But the actual outcomes, we don't have control over those. They emerge from the setup that we've created. I think I reordered this slide because this was supposed to come before it. But the idea is instead of trying to jerk the culture, we need to plant the seeds, have conversations with leaders saying, gosh, that's a really hard problem. Have we really thought about how we could direct our culture in a different direction? And then you go and you talk to the next leader and you land that. And my favorite trick out of all of this, right, is to do this enough, sometimes over months, sometimes over years. Sometimes you can do it faster, but sometimes it takes people a long time to learn, right? You're all the best and brightest. You can say that, repeat that, I told you that, it's true. And so what we can do is plant these seeds and give people these ideas, and you let it rattle around in their head for a while, right? And eventually somebody's going to pop up on Slack and be like, I just had this awesome idea. And you'd be like, yeah, that's a really good idea. because it's exactly what you wanted, or close enough, right? So plant seeds and nourish them, because a lot of times you might not get exactly what you want, but you will make progress, and you're less likely to get blowback from the system. And probably the thing I think that I've really worked the hardest on the last few years is just to accept things as they are, right? Like, I have a dream. I can see a future for this company that is better than where we are today. I can see multiple paths to get there. But the fact is, I will never make progress on that until I accept where I am right now, right? And so when we start to accept things just as they are without judgment, right? And this maybe goes into like blameless culture a little bit, but really it's just kind of saying, yep, that happened. I'm not going to get angry about it. I'm not going to go blame people. I'm just going to like start listening and understanding. And that acceptance for you, that stance, helps you absorb kind of the change as it comes at you. And when people come and they argue with you, right? Like, instead of getting up in the argument, you can be like, wow, that dude's really argumentative. This kind of sucks. But you can detach from that feeling and just accept it for what it is. The other thing about it is, like, I wanted to mention is we've talked a lot about vulnerability the last few days, right? The dark side of vulnerability is that folks are going to come at you. And when you accept that and you're ready for it, it's not going to surprise you. The other thing that happens, some of these kind of overlap a little bit, just like our talks have, is the thing isn't the thing a lot of times, right? An engineer will come complaining about, like, oh, this code is total crap. We should burn the system down. And, sometimes you dig in, you're like, the code's not that bad. We could probably refactor this. And so you go start asking those fool questions, right? Like, what's going on here? Like, how are you doing? What's been going on in your life? Are you getting enough sleep, which is probably the most important one? And they will complain. They will come at you. They'll come to your VP and whine about things. But the thing that they whine about is usually not the thing that pissed them off, right? And a lot of times we'll see this. We're humans. We're complex. We often express things in the place where we can express them. And there's kind of a manifestation of a well-studied concept, which is fundamental common ground breakdown. I'm not going to go deep into that, but like this whole like asking questions to get deeper and understand what we're actually trying to do here is actually picking at the bottom of when the thing isn't the thing, we have different assumptions and different contexts that we're acting off of. And so when we start to recognize that often people are acting from the wrong context, we can pick at it and get them that context, or maybe find that we're missing some context and change our tack and move forward. This one's probably pretty obvious. We don't get up to this position without managing up, right? Like, if you suck at managing up, you're unlikely to become a staff engineer. But the metaphor I like is been using lately, is to put cards in my manager's hand. So I will go do things independently. Sometimes I don't even tell them I'm doing it. And then I'll get it done, and I'll be like, hey, boss, look, I just did this thing. And like, here, now you have an ace in your hand, right? And you go do another one. But like that managing up, making sure that you have that feed of information going to your manager, your VP, whatever it is, means that when they get commentary comes in or your promo cycle comes up, they have 4 aces in their hand. They're ready to play and lay that hand down and move things forward. And this is really, really powerful. It is not enough just to be on the call and hear people. You have to be actively listening, and not just actively listening, because like a lot of times we'll do this, and we're doing great. We are getting that context into our own brains. But if we're just sitting there stone-faced, right, on the camera, maybe it looks like a frozen image. Sometimes I see people sitting there, and maybe they're listening, and you talk to them later, and you could tell that they actually heard it afterwards. But when you make little signals during a conversation that, nods, right? I see some of you nodding out there. That's nice active listening, right? It's giving me feedback. I know you are listening. That guy back there is sleeping. There's nobody sleeping back there. And a little trick I like to do for remote workers is, the reason I put her way up there is what I do is I have my laptop over here, and I have my big screen to the left of it, and I have a good camera up on top of it, just a little above my head, and face on, and I put my Zoom window, or my Google Meet window, right underneath the camera. What does that do with my eyes? It's in the camera. It's closer to the camera. So the people on the other side of the class feel like you're making some eye contact. You could actually just put something you're reading up there. I'll do that too if it's a really boring meeting. But the trick is just make sure you're signaling that engagement, because often what it'll do is it'll continue the conversation, especially in more intimate settings, by making people understand that you are there with them. They'll get talking more. You'll learn more. You'll be able to communicate more. This is my favorite superpower. She who writes the docs writes the rules. You can change out the pronouns if you like. How many of you done this? Where you go, there's a doc needs to be written, and you got an opinion, you write it, you maybe get a couple of comments on it, and then it's ratified. This happens all the frickin' time if you're good at writing docs. And so if you get in there, I just don't really have a lot to say about this actually, right? If you see that opportunity, it's something you care about, go write that doc, because then your words are the ones everybody's reading. And most of the time, people aren't that interested in making it perfect. They're going to look it over and probably skim it and go, that looks okay, ship it. I love it. It's so powerful. And this is the only one of my photos. So this is my old dog, Rufus. And he was about 80 pounds. That's a big dog. And he was a gentle, gentle dog. Right? This is where I meant to talk about dark side of vulnerability. And so I take Rufus out for walks, be cruising on the sidewalk, and somebody would be coming the other way with a tiny dog. And you never know what's going to happen to those little dogs, right? And you'd get up there, and very often with Rufus, they would go ballistic. Just barking and snapping, biting at his fur. He had this big, thick mane, so they wouldn't really get to his skin. They just kind of goober up his hair. And I was confused about this. I'm like, this is the nicest dog. He's never hurt anybody, and it definitely isn't going to hurt a little dog. He loves little dogs. So what is going on here? And then it occurred to me one day on a walk, right after it happened. And this all happens to us too. This is going to feel familiar. When you're the safe one to bitch at, you're the one that's going to get bitched at. Right? I have a 14-year-old son. Guess who he complains to? Guess who he complains about? So remember Rufus, when this happens sometimes, is sometimes the reason why you're under attack, why you're getting hammered, is not because you did something wrong. It's simply because actually you are safe to attack because people know that you're not going to come back at them. And maybe like I said before, they have something going on in their life. There's some energy they have that has to go somewhere. And so when you keep this in mind, again, it's about controlling our own reactions. You can sit back and do like Rufus did, turn your head so all they get is hair. And he would go in circles sometimes, just like this, with these little dogs just hanging off of him. And that we have to do that sometimes, right? And just remember that it will feel like you are the lightning rod sometimes, and that is a good thing because, one, it's coming to you and not your teams. And you're prepared for it, now, at least. And we can't always just do what Rufus did, right? When somebody's continually attacking us, we can't just turn away, right? We have work to do, we have progress to make. And so Karl Popper has this thing called the paradox of tolerance. Anybody familiar with it? More of you need to be. And so the paradox of tolerance just kind of goes like this. If we tolerate intolerance, that intolerance will destroy the environment of tolerance that we created. And so this actually unlocked Rosenberg's nonviolent communication for me. I don't actually recommend that very frequently anymore without this kind of rider that you need to read about the paradox of tolerance along with it. Because nonviolent communication offers a ton of tools for us, ways of speaking where we kind of avoid words that trigger violent feelings in people. It's the whole book on it, go read it. I'm not an expert in that. I only just skimmed out the parts that I liked. But like when it's blended with this paradox of tolerance, then all of a sudden you can say like, I'm trying to be nonviolent in my communication, but often there's power imbalances, right? There's intolerance. And so when we handle this, when we recognize it, we have to create boundaries. We have to put a stop to it. So when somebody's exhibiting that behavior repeatedly and you're sick of it, right? We have to escalate. Ideally, we can do that low key first, like maybe go to their manager and be like, hey, what's going on with Bob? He's been such a jerk lately. It's not in character for him. That's a great way to start. Maybe if you know the person well enough, you can have a one-on-one. But we do have to create a boundary and be like, no. It's not okay to bite me. It's not okay to yip at me. And sometimes creating that boundary means an escalation to your manager, to HR. And you have to be prepared to do that, or sometimes these people will just keep coming, and it'll take your energy away from everything else you're trying to do. Finally, I stole this one from my therapist. It was one of the first things she taught me, and the most important point I want you to take out of here is don't should on yourself. And what does that mean? So shoulding on yourself is when you do something like, one time I was in a meeting with a bunch of, like a CTO team, and they asked for feedback. And I went, all right, I'm gonna give them feedback. Yeah, okay. Raised my hand. All right, well, I gave him the feedback. I thought he did a pretty good job being nonviolent communicator, being impartial, not calling people's, tickling people's egos. It didn't matter, right? It wasn't about me. And so I look back on that, right? Like after things played out, they talked to my VP, it was a whole thing. And I look back and I had all these regrets. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. Oh, I should have done this. But what I was doing, I was shitting on myself. Like, it's already over. I can't do anything about it now. But what I can do is learn from it. I can take the lessons that are available to me from that experience. I can go and spend time with my VP to make sure he understands the context and things like that. But it's time to move on. Don't shit on yourself. And with that, I'm Tobey. I appreciate you all listening. We have some jobs up on jobs.netflix.com, and you can find me on Hachyderm. Thank you very much.